Welcome back to the Mina Kimes Show, featuring Lenny, the only NFL podcast where one of the hosts is rooting against the Knicks because they have a cat on their team. That's Lenny. I'm Mina Kimes. I'm rooting for Cat, Karl Anthony Towns. I don't really care who wins the NBA. I know, Greg, you're a big Celtics fan, so maybe you got some emotions. But I find myself rooting for Cat. Just am.
I agree. I feel like he's misunderstood. And yet I'm a small person, literally and figuratively. So I'm rooting against the Knicks just because they broke my heart this year.
Because of the Celtics. It is, when this comes out, actually don't know what's going on, who's playing, and what will have happened by then. But we are not here to talk to the NBA. We are here to do something that you and I have done before, that I do every year. I think you did this exact pod with me last year. I didn't go back and check. Which is, we are going through both conferences. Today we're doing the AFC. Next week we'll be doing the NFC. And for every team, one of us is going to pick an X-Factor, a player that could swing the season. The only rules are it can't be a quarterback, because it would be the quarterback for every single team, and it can't be a coach. It has to be a player. Greg, we've done this before, right?
We did it last season, I know, because I checked to see if I could find a definition for X Factor so that I was on track. So I'm ready.
I do feel like maybe we did Jack Jones for the Raiders, which was maybe that was 2 years ago, maybe not last year.
No, it was absolutely last year. You were on board with me, and we were right. The whole point is it's not predicting the person's going to be great. At least that's how I view it. It's like they could either make or break their season. I think Jack Jones helped to break their season, unfortunately.
I don't think he's on a team right now, if at last I checked. Okay, so we'll start with the AFC East. I will go first. And I'm going to start with the Buffalo Bills. I thought about doing Joey Bosa. Part of me thought about that, Look, here's the thing about the Bills. No player will swing this season. So I think swing might be the wrong way to describe it. It's like also swing the season. Sorry, I'm doing the thing where I over-explain the premise of the pod. But swing the season means different things for different teams. For a rebuilding team, it could be more of a core player, a young player. For a team that's always in the mix, on the verge of going to the Super Bowl, like the Bills, it could be the finishing piece, right? And so I actually think, make a pretty strong case for Joey Bosa, because if Joey Bosa was to be great and impactful, that would absolutely be the type of thing that swings the season. Unfortunately, it is May 27th and Joey Bosa is already hurt. Greg, I don't know if you saw that piece of news. So Joey Bosa, not that that's the reason why he wouldn't be my pick, but it's more so, you really hate to say it, but it is kind of feels like, yeah, it's going to be another one of those seasons for Joey Bosa.
Yeah, and that Sean McDermott in the press conference immediately after said, like, yeah, it's concerning. They talked this big game, by the way, that, well, we've got different trainers here. We have a whole plan for Joey Bosa that's going to be different than what he had in LA, but he would make a huge difference. And yet I'm amazed they gave him $12 million.
Yeah. So I'm not going to pick Joey Bosa. I'm going to go with a rookie. There's a few teams where I went with rookies, and I'm going to go with their first round draft pick, Maxwell Hairston, the cornerback, because he's starting. He's in place to start. It would be very surprising if he didn't, opposite Christian Bedford, who got paid this offseason. But also, Greg, because we've seen, like, in some of the Bills' meaningful losses, teams have gone after the second cornerback on this team. I think back to I was looking at my notes from the AFC Championship game. Kyrie Elam and Russell Douglas gave up combined 100 yards. They were, this is just something we've seen again with this team, is like, our defense rather, is teams have gone after the non-Christian Benfords on defense. Linebacker is also a bit of an issue. You could have picked Matt Milano. But this is a team that last year, a defense that was pretty solid for the most part, but finished 29th in DVOA against wide receiver twos. Again, kind of furthering that theme. And while the pass defense was largely fine, when they did not get pressure on pass defense, they were pretty miserable. 30th in EPA per play, 31st in first down rate when they didn't get pressure. So if I had to pick something that I think might be like the Achilles heel and what could be the difference between this team making the Super Bowl and not, pass defense would be it for me. You could choose a pass rusher. I'm going to go with the second cornerback.
Yeah, and he's Maxwell Hairston playing in a spot where he has to play, right away, and he matters. And it reminds me so much of when they made a somewhat surprising late first-round pick with Kyer Elam because they absolutely needed a guy to come in and start right away. Now, that was Christian Benford's draft, and I remember even in that training camp, they'd be like, hey, this like late round pick actually looks better than Kyer Elam. A little bit of a concern. And he turned into a great player. So, I don't know if a gentleman by the name of Dorian Strong, their 6th round pick, plays the Christian Benford role if Hairston doesn't work out. But you're absolutely right that he matters so much. Milano also stands out to me just because he took a pay cut this offseason, which I felt like was really under the radar. And if they got real Matt Milano back at 30 years old, like, man, that would really help them.
Yeah, he came back after, pretty brutal injury and really struggled down the stretch. And I'm willing to chalk that up to, hey, maybe he came back too soon, he rushed back, or he was still recovering. But he was another player who you saw offenses go after in the playoffs. And if he's able to return to form, that would be massive for them. So I think he would be a good second choice. I'm not going offense because I think what we've just seen is, not too dissimilar from Patrick Mahomes. It's not that it doesn't matter with Josh Allen, but yes, would it be great if Dalton Kincaid or Keon Coleman takes a leap? Sure, but this was a top 3 offense last year in most efficiency metrics. Like, they don't need to be that much better. It's really the defense. And the team knows that, by the way, right? Like, Brandon Beane clearly focused on defense in the draft and got a little bit snippy, right, about not adding to the offense. But I think they're aware that defense, similar to the Chiefs, I think, is going to be the thing that swings this team. All right, you can go next. Give me the team that you root for, the New England Patriots.
Okay, thought about a lot of options here. I'm going Christian Barmore because, first of all, it's crazy. There's only a few draft picks on this team that have been there longer. There's actually not that many Bill Belichick draft picks, and he just left. But the few that have been there longer are Duggar, Michael Onwenu, Anthony Jennings, and I look at Barmore, and you look at the roster, and they definitely raised the floor, but how can their ceiling be higher? There's not a lot of potential great players to me on their offense other than Drake May, but you have all-pro type cornerback in Christian Gonzalez, and you have a guy that could be an all-pro in Christian Barmore, and he just came into the league almost as an elite pass rusher right off the bat. But I love this exercise that you give me every year because it gives me an excuse to just go back and watch a certain type of tape that I wouldn't. And I went back and watched Barmore from a couple of years ago, and just his strength, his strength and versatility are just awesome. Like, he has the whole bag. There was a game on Christmas Eve where they won and lost their chance at the 2 pick. I thought that meant they would lose Drake May. It turned out Jaden Daniels goes 2 anyways, and they get Drake May, where he lines up everywhere and he destroys that entire game. He destroys Russell Wilson. He made Quinn Miners, who's a good player, now he's even a great player, look literally weak just throwing a dude around, and you just don't see that. So Barmore, to me, coming off a blood clot issue, which I should have mentioned, kept him out most of last year. He's fully cleared. He's practiced. The reports are that he looks like he's totally normal back at practice, and so that'd be huge for them if he's back in a big way.
If Christian Barmore is back to being the player that we saw a couple of years ago before he missed a season, you could argue that the Patriots defense has 2 pairs that are up there with any in the NFL in terms of Barmore and Milton Williams at the defensive line, and then Christian Gonzalez and Carlton Davis at quarterback. Great defenses have been built on far less. And to your point, they're really the only source of continuity, right? Other than Duggar. I was looking at the Patriots depth chart. Holy smoke. Our-Lads does that thing where they change the colors if they're acquired in free agency, and then you can see draft. There are so few guys who've been on this team. They've completely turned over the page on both offense and defense. So it does feel like you really need, particularly on defense, I think, where, because on offense, you don't really want continuity with any of those guys. Defense, though, okay, great. If you can marry some of the existing great players, and Barmore truly was a great player, with some of the additions, I think they could bounce back in a big way. Also with Vrabel as a coach, I would contend that I think Stephon Diggs could also be up for consideration, though, for this team. Did you think about that?
Yes, I did. There are reports he could be back anywhere from 4 to 8. I guess my view on Diggs is if he comes in and he's a solid role player, that's pretty close to the highest that you could expect out of him. My
Yeah.
expectations are that he's just going to fit in well. If you told me like Kendrick Bourne, who's a year further away from his ACL surgery, and I'm a Kendrick Bourne defender like our friend Nate Tice, has an equal or has a decent season similar to Stephon Diggs, like that wouldn't surprise me too. So to me, Diggs is just like adding another solid piece along with Demario Davis, whoever else ends up getting snaps there. But I don't know if he has the ceiling to be like the total X factor. But it would be nice. It would be nice if he did.
I think the reason I went with Diggs, I felt like if he is, I could see it being, you could almost creating like a dividing line. If he's above average, I feel pretty good about this defense. And if he's offense for me, and if he's below average, I'm worried, right? Just because of the players around him. So they don't need him to be great, but I do feel like they need him to provide some veteran competence in that receiving group. Okay, Jets. I'm gonna do Jets next. So this was hard because I kind of, to go back to my point at the beginning, like I don't really know what success looks like. I think just being normal is going to be
everyone
right?
being like happy.
Yeah, like good, better vibes. But I think my choice is a good one for success, both from a long and short term perspective, and that's Sauce Gardner. This defense was this defense wildly underperformed last year relative to their talent level, and things just kind of went off of a cliff. And there's a litany of reasons for that. But I think for things to get back on track, you really need Gardner to look more like he did early in his career. And he wasn't awful last year, but he had some real ups and downs. I think about him just getting absolutely wrecked by Calvin Ridley in the Titans. There were just a few games where he got beat pretty bad by the other team's number one wide receiver, and then tackling at times was such an issue, he actually had to come off the field in moments. And I don't think he's ever going to be one of the better tackling corners in the NFL. But, when he was a rookie, Greg, we were talking about him as one of the 2 or 3 best corners in the entire league. And so he's capable of that. And if he can get anywhere close to that again, it's like, okay, well, we feel good about our front. We've got a good linebacker group. This defense can get back to being at least above average at minimum. But if he's not, you're worried. And you got to make decisions about him. They just picked up his 5th-year option. When I Googled that, I also learned that he is dating Ice Spice. So he's got that going for him. But
really?
Yeah, right. I was surprised.
And Stephon Diggs with Cardi B, it's like a whole AFC East thing.
Yeah.
This is.
But yes, last year he had 9 passes defense, down from 20 as a rookie. The metrics are not kind to him. Corner metrics are always a little bit all over the place. But that I feel like he has to be, like, when you think about this team and like what do you feel good about in the 2024 season? Obviously, Jets fans they don't have high expectations, but I think this would be a big metric of whether or not it's a successful season.
Yeah, that's such a good call, and I fall victim, I think, to just assuming Sauce Gardner is going to be great, because cornerbacks that show his level of production and his level of talent that early are so incredibly rare, and the position is so volatile in general that I'm willing to just give a total pass for whatever reason, whether it's variance because that's just the play of cornerback, or he wasn't vibing with the coaching staff, which I think we've learned to absolutely be the case. Like, I will give him a pass maybe more than I would a player at another position. Like, it's funny because you think of him and Derek Stingley, and they've been this back and forth, like, who is right, taking him first. Like, Stingley's already gotten paid, and if I was the Jets, I would have no hesitation of paying Gardner that money now, because I do believe in him that much. And I don't necessarily think, I don't know who I would take between him and Stingley long term. Just because the great Stingley year happened last, I don't think it's a huge difference. So I believe in Sauce, but you're right. If they somehow got last year's Sauce again, like that would be a big problem for them.
Stingley also in a much better ecosystem, much better talent in that secondary, better coaching. So he has that going for him. All right, Miami Dolphins.
Okay, so if I had the Jets, I was like maybe thinking Olufashinu. And here for the Dolphins, for a second, I thought Patrick Paul, who they are riding with as their starting left tackle to replace Taron Armstead, like Chris Greer was very aggressive about this when Armstead retired. But I'm not going with either because I thought it was more interesting to talk about Jalen Phillips, the pass rusher, another guy coming off of an injury, and another guy that I enjoyed going back to watch. And just as a reminder for people, like he had an Achilles injury, and then he came back from that surprisingly quickly last year and tore his ACL, which you just hate to see, and you hate to think that maybe he came back too early. And it's a lot to expect him to come back and be anything better than like a solid pass rusher in his first year back from injury, but he could do everything. He was 22 years old in his second year, and there's like no argument to the fact that he was a top 10 pass rusher. You could argue he was like close to that second level, kind of behind the Nick Bosa and Myles Garrett. Like he was in that Danielle Hunter and Trey Hendrickson level as like a second year player. He was that good. So at least in terms of upside, a guy who could really change who the Dolphins are, you could pair him a little bit with Bradley Chubb, who's also been injured a lot, but I've lost a little hope there. Like Jalen Phillips, to me, is like a definition of an X factor.
Well, and if he's healthy, between him and Chop Robinson, you have like an identity on defense. Like there's a clear strength with that pass rush. If he's not, I mean, it's this is a defense and a team that has had to shed a lot of talent because of the contracts. It's been a very top heavy offense, and we'll see what happens with Jalen Ramsey. But it's a bad secondary. Like, holy smokes. Especially without Ramsey, if they do end up moving on from him, it's kind of unclear what's going to happen there because they don't have a lot of leverage with him. But yeah, they're going to be really dependent on that pass rush. And I love, man, Jalen Phillips, when he was healthy, I was such a fan of. I feel like he also showed signs, to your point, of like ascending into being one of those dudes, because it wasn't just like, oh, there's so much promise, but he had the production and the traits, and the injuries have just been absolutely brutal. I will say it's hard for me not to go with Patrick Paul. That would have probably been my choice though, just because, oh my god, like they are really like there's the depth at tackle is just non-existent for them. They are really betting on this dude being a competent starter.
Yes, with the teams I had, I felt like there's a few Patrick Paul like players out there, and maybe I just got tired of it. But yes, he played a decent amount too as a rookie because Armstead wasn't always out there, and it wasn't great on tape. Like he wasn't a standout. Some Dolphins fans will defend him. He was a rookie tackle, but yeah, they're really relying on him. They're relying on the system to help and get the ball out quicker and everything. But this to me feels like a do or die year for Chris Greer, and he needs some of those younger picks to step up, and Paul's number one of them.
All right, let's do the AFC North next. I'll go first with the Bengals because I just feel like this one is really obvious. It's Trey Hendrickson. I mean, right? Like,
unless he's not on the, I'm assuming he's on the team, right? I mean, so if he's on the team, he's gonna be Trey Hendrickson, isn't he?
Well, if he's not on the team,
yeah.
Speaking of, it's an interesting leverage question. It seems like he wants to stay really badly. And there haven't been leaks about extravagant contract demands, which makes me think they could get it done. But also, like, if he's not there, and, we don't have to revisit, obviously, the disproportionate amount of sack production they got out of him versus everybody else on the team. Like, I don't know where it's coming from. Their first round draft pick who had 4.5 career sacks in college.
Who's not even at OTAs because
right,
of some contractual language, which almost never happens. And Bengals fans get mad when you pick on like the Bengals front office like this. Is this happening to other teams? Sorry, just saying.
They're also roasting him for the lack of sack. They're roasting their own draft pick. Okay. Let me start from a more positive place. The optimistic case for the Bengals being better this year, because the offense is going to be awesome. We already know that, right? Is that the young players on defense, some of them, not all of them, but some of them, not just, Shamar Stewart and Demetrius Knight was the linebacker they took out of South Carolina, but also some of the guys they've drafted over the last few years. That Lou Anarumo was this brilliant schematic mind, but he sucked at development. And you bring in Al Golden from college, and he's better at working with young players. And maybe you can get some of these young players going. On the back end, you have players who have been decent at times, Cam Taylor-Britt, Dax Hill, get them back on track, and you can at least approach average. If you take Trey Hendrickson out of that equation, I find it really hard to imagine that best case scenario approaching reality, Greg.
Right, because even with Trey Hendrickson, the other pass rushers, you mentioned first round pick, Shamar Stewart. They had a first round pick a couple years ago, Miles Murphy, who could be in the mix. Joseph Asai, they brought back, I believe, was a free agent. And like, it's just not a great supportive group. I do assume just because they're not going to trade him at this point. What is the point of trading Trey Hendrickson? That even if it's annoying and you're going to have to talk about it a lot on your podcast in the meantime, it'll get settled eventually. And I'll be curious to see how many guaranteed years he has on it. I think they want 2 and he wants 3 is probably what the problem is. And that they promised him they would take care of him if he played well last year. And then he led the league in sacks. And it's like, oh, you still haven't taken care of me.
I'm sorry. I just realized I gave you like the dregs. I took the 2 competitive teams in the AFC North.
Okay. Okay.
You can have the Cleveland Browns.
Yes.
But sometimes doing teams like this is interesting, wouldn't you say?
It is, because it felt like you could almost go anywhere. And I chose a pretty random one who's established as a very good player, and that's Denzel Ward. And the reason I did was because last year it really stuck with me. There were about 3 games last season when Denzel Ward took over. When he looked like the best cornerback in the league. And everyone had this idea, because those 3 games, you just don't see that out of cornerbacks too often, that he's this amazing player. And he is an amazing player overall, but I think like the rest of the defense, he got dragged down. And he had some bad games too. He had some games where he got picked on some of his metrics in terms of yards per catch and stuff. It was pretty up and down. And to me, he felt symbolic of the defense in general and the secondary in general, where it's also Martin Emerson is there, is Greg Newsome. Both of them are in contract years. Both of them struggled. They were supposed to be kind of the core of this defense for Jim Schwartz that at this time a year ago we thought was going to be a top 10 defense. Yeah. They were one of the best in the league. So to me, I thought Ward was a good pick, kind of representing that we know it's in there. If for whatever reason the defense is on the same page and you're getting the best Denzel Ward at 28, 29 years old, he is a difference maker. But there were some games last year where he did not look like the Denzel Ward of old, and that was kind of like the whole Browns defense.
Yeah, the Browns defense is really a case study for great defense doesn't repeat year to year. Mm-hmm. It's just statistically very difficult. And I think he's a good pick to me because this team, again, kind of going back to what does success look like, you really want to see the defense return to form. And you also think it's probably going to be pretty stylistically similar to what it was, what it's been under Jim Schwartz. They're still going to play a lot of man coverage, still going to lean very heavily on the 4-man rush. You really need great cornerback play to pull that off. And, I'm looking at the group right now. I think Mason Graham is a really good, I know, Browns fans had mixed feelings about the pick and trading out from Hunter, but I do think he's a very good schematic fit for that 4-down front that they use. And I think he's going to help them in a lot of ways because they haven't been able to get pressure up the inside. But yeah, it all falls apart if you don't have, I don't think Ward has to be, he's a good pick too, because you saw he's capable of being one of the best corners in the NFL. I don't think he has to be one of the best corners in the NFL for this defense to improve upon what we saw last year. Offensively, I don't even know what you want out of this group. What are you going for here?
A better line, right? A better offensive line, because they've put so much money into it that I thought about that. Joel Bitonio would have been a weird pick. He threatened to retire, but just he would have been symbolic of that line, which just they put resources in, they put money in terms of Wyatt Teller, and just they need it to be better overall. They definitely felt like the Bill Callahan effect leaving. If there's any way to save this offense, I would think that's it.
I guess I would argue if the whole premise of the 2024 Browns is we're going to take some shots at quarterback and then we've got all this draft capital going into next year, fine. But what environment are you putting either these young quarterbacks in or that hypothetical future quarterback? It's not a good receiver group, and it's an offensive line with a bunch of question marks. So offensive line's a good choice. I mean, it's funny because it's like a lot of players who have been good and have been either injured or took a step backwards. You would
Jack
probably Conklin. I mean, even like a DeJuan Jones, like Posich, who was great at first. I think if they're going to run it back next year, or run back some of these players, you'd want at least one of them to kind of return to form to feel good about that. But yeah, I don't know.
This depth chart just makes me wonder why Andrew Berry is still there, because even if ownership is taking the blame for the worst transaction like in the history of sports with Deshaun Watson, he somehow survived that. He's been there for 5 years, and it's not a good roster. So
yeah. Well, it was a roster that was good, I think, 2 years ago.
Yes.
And then it's just degraded.
It's what happens when you don't have any draft picks, and because of the Deshaun Watson trade, and then the picks you made haven't really worked.
And then you take 2 running backs. I don't know. That's very confusing. Yeah, defense is good. See if defense can get back on track. That's feasible to me. Like, it's a talented defense. There's a lot of talent. I'm gonna go. Okay, so I'll do the Ravens next, and I'm gonna make a pick that's very similar to what I did with the Bills, which is unsurprising because they're kind of two sides of the same coin in a lot of ways. I'm gonna go with Chidobe Awuzie, who is the second corner. Really, the same logic. I talked about how the Bills constantly got attacked. We know who it's. Brandon Stevens. Talking about Brandon Stevens. Who was kind of the boogeyman of the Ravens season. Partly, by the way, the reason why I'm picking Awuzie is, and I don't think I've talked about this enough, Nate Wiggins was really good last year as a rookie. He had some ups and downs, I think particularly at the beginning of the season, and maybe that's kind of why his play in the second half of the season kind of slipped under the radar a little bit because he had he gave up some big plays early on. But I thought by the end of the year, he looked incredibly comfortable, really good scheme fit. You see why, I mean, it's shocking, right? The Ravens drafted him for a reason, but I thought, really good sense of when to play plays on the ball, really good closing speed and recovery speed, uses his length well. I thought his size was not an issue in a way that I thought it might be. So you feel good. And by the way, the Met stats on him, the coverage stats are amazing. Now, again, it's a little bit murky and he got to play behind next to, 2 very good safeties and all of that. Marlon Humphrey, who's amazing. But in any case, my point is your Ravens defense, you feel really good about most of this unit. Awuzie or whoever, if he doesn't play, is the clear weak link. So when you think about going against, your Josh Allens, your Patrick Mahomes of the world, your Joe Burrows, that's who they're going to attack. And Awuzie was really injured last year. He wasn't great when he played. But for most of his career, he's been at minimum an average NFL corner. And if you can just get average to above average cornerback play out of him, I think the pass defense should be a lot better than what they were in the beginning of last season.
You've convinced me. I was skeptical at first, but it was more because I was skeptical of Awuzie. Like, I thought that was such a bizarre signing by the Titans a year ago.
Oh, by the Titans, yeah.
Yeah, because I think people slept on he really struggled at the end of his Cincinnati time. And maybe it's like I was saying, like cornerback is really volatile, but he was benched. Like he couldn't get on the field at times at the end of his run in Cincinnati. And sometimes when a cornerback's confidence goes, like maybe it will come back. And it's what you get out of a great organization that you could see him plugging in and being totally solid and like giving them 700, 800 good snaps and being like, oh, the Ravens did it again. But I guess I'm basing it more off how it ended in Cincinnati and then how it went for Tennessee. But it's totally a good shout out. What you convinced me is like that spot is an issue because if it's not him, I don't know who it is. And you're right, that's going to be where teams attack.
Yeah, just looking at the depth chart, TJ Tampa, who played a little bit last year, fourth round draft pick. They drafted a guy in the sixth round this year, who I'm not going to pretend like I know anything about. Jalen Armour Davis played some, but someone's gonna have to play. So yeah, that's what I'm looking at for Baltimore. Finally, the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Okay. I'm going to now. I'm doing my left tackle, so I felt like that could have fit for a lot of these teams. I mean, it's Broderick Jones. You took him a couple of years ago. I'd forgotten they actually traded up with the Patriots and gave up a pick. And a lot of Steelers fans at the time wanted Christian Gonzalez in that spot because they could have
Mm,
used a cornerback. And the Patriots took Gonzalez a couple of picks later, and they took Broderick Jones, and he's been at right tackle. I mean, they moved him to left tackle rather, and he hasn't looked good. And there's really no backup plan. Rather, sorry, he's moving to left tackle now, and there's like no backup plan if he doesn't work. And I don't think like the feeling last year was that he looked particularly good at right tackle. And so now Dan Moore moves on, and Broderick Jones, who in their old build was kind of an afterthought and they'd given up on, but now he's moved to
yeah.
left tackle. It's just very confusing to me. And on paper, the offensive line could be really good if he plays well. That's the part that I think Steelers fans have to be excited about, that they have a good, potentially very good young offensive line if Broderick Jones comes through.
Yeah, the interior of the offensive line is awesome, right? With Seomalu, Zach Frazier, Mason McCormick, and then yeah, Troy Fautanu is going to play on the right side. But yeah, it feels like also whether it's Aaron Rodgers or Will Howard, pardon me, not Will Anderson, or I guess Mason Rudolph. That's kind of going to be the thing. Can they protect whoever it is, and can they improve the run game as well? I mean, you draft Caleb Johnson in the third round. The premise that you can get more out of the young back than you did with Harris, but I have my criticisms of Najee Harris, but the run blocking was not good for a lot of the season for him from a lot of his career, frankly. So yeah, I think offensive line makes a ton of sense for them, especially when we don't know who's going to play quarterback. I was looking at the Steelers defense, and I was tempted. Well, I'm not picking for them, but Minka Fitzpatrick is a guy who just really jumped
Mm.
out to me. I don't know. I feel like I keep picking like guys who were like have been great, but like are they still great type players? This secondary, you bring in Darius Slay, but some games where I would argue that the Steelers secondary is why they lost a lot of games last year.
Yeah, and there was just some strange buzz around Minka Fitzpatrick where you didn't have to read between the lines too hard if you were reading the local coverage, that there was some sort of disconnect with players on the team not being happy with each other, players not sticking to
Right.
assignments, and that maybe on one side of things was Minka Fitzpatrick and on the other were some of like the veterans on that team. And it made me wonder if he would still be on this team going into 2025, but he is. And you look back on that trade where they gave up the first for Minka, it was obviously a great trade, but like they would love to have old Minka Fitzpatrick back instead of like old Minka Fitzpatrick. See
All
what I
right.
did
Yeah. Let's take a quick break, come back and do the AFC West. All right, we are back doing X Factors for the AFC. I will go first. We just talked about a left tackle, so I'm gonna go a different direction. Let's do the Broncos first, who do not have a left tackle problem, who do not have any offensive line issues. The Broncos had the best run blocking offensive line in football last year, according to run block win rate, ESPN's metric. Checked out. Yet, despite that, they only finished 24th in rushing DVOA. They were average in passing. And that was largely because they didn't get any extra production out of their backs. NGS has that great stat, rush yards over expected per carry, which is basically based on the blocking and the position of the defenders, how many yards should a running back get and whether or not they're exceeding that. And the Broncos were 26 in the percentage of their rushes that exceeded expectations last year.
Mm.
Thus, my choice is RJ Hardy, their second round pick, the running back that they brought in, for all of the reasons that I just laid out. I haven't talked about him at all. I did get a chance to watch him ahead of the draft, and he is really, really fun. I mean, he's like a tackle, like he's so elusive he's an interesting player too, because I think he averaged something stupid like, running back cost stats like 7 yards per carry or whatever. And some of that is dragged up by explosive runs, but a lot of it is to me, Greg, he consistently was able to get just a little bit more than maybe your average back would, and I really feel like that's what the Denver Broncos offense was missing last season.
He's such a fascinating pick. Like I did a show with Maurice Jones-Drew leading up to the draft and Daniel Jeremiah, and I think he compared him to Sproles, which is fascinating because Sean Payton had Sproles in New Orleans, and I thought that was an interesting comp for him, and it made me wonder, like, what is RJ Harvey going to be as a pro? And now he's in a spot where I think he's going to have a lot of volume, but I'm not totally sure. Like, can he handle a lot of volume? I hope so, because he's like such an entertaining back. I think he's going to be great on passing downs. And man, Sean Payton is great with a great passing down back, whether it was Sproles or Pierre Thomas or whoever it's been through the years. So I think he'll be awesome. I wonder how many actual carries he's going to get. Maybe he can handle more because his body type, like, he doesn't seem like Sproles exactly to me. He's not, my height. Like, I think he could get more work than that.
I guess Audric Estime would be their number 2, who's more of like a power, traditional, kind of bruiser type back. As an Audric Estime dynasty manager, I would love for him to get the goal line carries in this relationship. But I also feel like Sean Payton really would like to run the ball at a pretty high clip and build the offense up off of that and the play action passing attack and all of that. And I have to think he was a little bit frustrated last year by their inability to do so. So I think, this is an offense that exceeded expectations. They have the thing that everybody wants, which is an actually good offensive line. So it's a great situation for the right back to take advantage of.
And not a logical, second round pick. I mean, a second receiver, right? Like, and it would have been hard to know who to pick out of that group.
Ingram was one who also interested me. I thought about him. It's funny. I feel like there was no single phrase uttered more by people in our industry over the last 4 months than Sean Payton wants his Joker, which, like, I don't think people even understand what it. Anyways, I don't think any of the players that they brought in are actually map on perfectly to the role that he wants, but Ingram can do some of the mismatch stuff and get you yards after the catch in a way that was missing in the Broncos offense last year. All right, do the Raiders.
Okay, I guess now I'm realizing I had a type for this exercise, which was similar to yours, formerly great players. In my case, often coming off of an injury. But I really do think that's what could, like, swing wins and losses the most. And it's Christian Wilkins for the Raiders, who signed, one of the biggest contracts in the entire league, is coming off of a really worrisome foot injury that he was back in a walking boot at one point in the offseason when that wasn't necessarily planned, according to Sean Reed at The Athletic, who does great work there. And now he's back out of the boot, but he's still not on the field. But just such a great pass rusher, like a great run stopper, just a complete guy who I think made the most of a really unique skill set and just like insane production in 2023. It was 61 pressures, got him paid. Other than that year, like, he wasn't that high of a pressure guy, and coming off a Jones fracture, he's unique. Even in the time he was with the Raiders, which was better than I remember, they used him a little differently. They lined him over the tackle a lot more. That might have been because of personnel. Like, we'll see how they want to use him. But on paper, they could have a really good defensive line if Malcolm Kuntz is back healthy too. And Wilkins obviously would be a huge part of that. And I also like that he's just like an instigator. I feel like he's the prototype. You love him if he's on your team and not if he's on the other team.
Can you name the Raiders' second cornerback?
Second cornerback?
I guess first. Can you name any of their corners?
I can't say his name. Marion Robinson.
Richardson. Yeah, I don't know
Richardson.
if he's in the mix.
Pau Malo. No, he's the safety. It's a wide open group. Darian Porter, I think, because he's a draft pick by Pete Carroll, and he's what Pete Carroll likes, might be near the top there. Who am I forgetting? I'm going to be mad.
Bennett.
Oh, Jacorian Bennett. I kind of like Jacorian Bennett as a rookie.
Eric Stokes, totally missed that signing. Did not know he was on the Raiders. It is rough back there, which isn't to say I disagree with you. I think for them to be competent, they really need this defensive line to go absolutely crazy because the secondary is rough. They did bring in Jeremy Chin at safety, but the corner group is just brutal. I mean, this has got to be the worst corner group in the NFL right now on paper. I am worried about Christian Wilkins because Pete
Yes.
Carroll talked about him in a way Pete Carroll talks about guys when they're someone who speaks Pete Carroll after listening to that man do press conferences and talk about injuries for over a decade. It's not great when he uses that tone to talk about a player's injury that he
Oh,
used to
no.
talk about Christian Wilkins. Yeah, I forgot the verbiage he used, but it was very frightening. Not great. Let me find it.
And he won in such a unique way. He was an awesome player, just with like his quickness, like in a way like what you would hope Mason Graham could be as a prospect, but it's like there's not that many of those guys. And man, if he doesn't have that with his feet, it's why I get at like what I think people overrate like how impossible it is to win with a quarterback contract on their roster. What's like it's very hard to win if you have a couple of these contracts where he's one of the highest paid players in the league. They got virtually nothing out of him a year ago, and they have guaranteed money to him this year that they just have to pay.
He had really become, like you said, like such a complete player too in Miami. Both, always disruptive as a pass rusher, but his run defense really improved. Unfortunately, Pete Carroll said it's been a difficult recovery. He's not ready to get back out. We're in the middle of a long, challenging process here. Not great. It's not great. I will say offensively, I agree with you going defense because I guess you could go Jacoby Myers maybe, but
we know who he is, right? I mean,
yeah, we know who he is. I think here, okay, I'll throw one out. Actually, I think you'd go with Jackson Powers Johnson.
Interesting.
Their full-time starting center. Because this was a really, really bad run game. We know they run the ball with Ashton Genty. And if they can block better, the vision for this offense is very easy to imagine. And I think is something that they can execute, particularly with an improved pass game. But if they can't run block better, it all falls apart. So you could go with,
Yeah, it's a great test of how much coaching matters for this offensive line, which underperformed, I thought, a little bit last year. I thought was going to be better than it actually was, and they're basically running it back with a new coaching staff. Shout out to the guy at the Dodgers game I went to just 2 weeks ago wearing a Jackson Powers Johnson jersey for giving me something to talk about on the Mina Kimes Show. I was like, that is so random. Is that a family member?
Has to be a family member.
It probably is. I thought about Jack Best, by the way. That was my backup choice to Christian Wilkins because of I just think they need him to be a contributor. Not that I think he's going to have some like Ladd McConkey season. I was maybe a little more down on him than others coming in, but like they just aren't other guys there. And so I think he's going to have the volume. He's going to have a chance to be a solid 2. He could be their 1 and it wouldn't be like that shocking.
Gonna need a different comp for him if it happens. I think again, the vision of the offense, 12 personnel, guys who in the field who can block. He is someone you can imagine pairing well. Trey Tucker gives you speed. Brock Bowers is the engine of the whole thing. You could see the vision for him being an important player for sure. And we know, they got a quarterback who's going to give them a chance through the air. Offensive line, I mean, we just think about Geno and how things went south in Seattle and when they struggled, it really all just came down to the offensive line. And people say I never say anything negative about Geno. His inability at times to handle an absolutely ridiculous amount of pressure, but make bad decisions in the face of it. So I feel like offensive line is definitely something I'd be comfortable isolating in because the Raiders offensive line is interesting. Like it's not a train wreck. They have good players.
Colton Miller wants more money.
Colton Miller, they should give it to him, honestly. Speaking of offensive line, the Chiefs, where else could we go? Offensive line here. This is the thing that kept them from winning the Super Bowl. Also, the Eagles being, maybe like one of the best teams in like the most complete teams in recent history. But it's, when you look at the Chiefs season, the ultimate undoing was the offensive line. It's been the case in both Super Bowls that they've lost. They went out, they added players. I'm going to go with Jalen Moore here. And I say that with some hesitation because I think there's even a world in which Josh Williams takes his job. Simmons.
Simmons.
William Simmons, sorry. My brain fart. But he's coming off of the injury. I think they're also like maybe even if he plays the left side, Jalen Moore could end up playing right tackle instead of Jawad Taylor. I don't know what this Chiefs offensive line is going to look like at the end of the year, quite frankly. Like by the end of the season, I think the starting five could be wildly different from what we see at the beginning of the season. But I do know that Moore, they're paying him with the expectation that he's going to fit into that plan somewhere. And he played a little bit in San Francisco. I didn't, I was surprised by the contract because it didn't seem commensurate with what I saw. He's a big, strong tackle. I thought struggled a bit with speed, but clearly their scouting departments liked something in him and felt like he was a good scheme fit for what they wanted to do. So, it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, I wonder if they had some information too, because one thing I found interesting in that process was the 49ers did compete reportedly pretty hard to keep him. We're a little surprised that, and that's why it got to, I believe, $15 million a year over 2 years, because I was like, wow, I can't believe Jalen Moore got that. But I think it was partly because however the Chiefs came in high initially, the 49ers, who had him in the building, wanted him too, potentially as Trent Williams' replacement. It's a position kind of like off-ball linebacker now that's like, okay, maybe it takes you a few years to really get ready, and you have a better chance of certainly surviving at the NFL level after you've been in the league. And he's had a great person to learn from and a coach and team to learn from in San Francisco. So it's a big bet, $15 million a year. And Josh Simmons, who knows when he'll be like ready and off of that injury, which is pretty serious. And if he'll even play left tackle. You're right. It could be a ton of different spots, but that to me is the only pick. Like I can't push back on that.
All right. Well, speaking of the only pick,
Oh,
think I know you're gonna. Well, there's two names that I am.
well, I feel this is the worst spot to be as a guest on the Mina Kimes Show featuring Lenny, which is you're just about to disappoint Mina. Because I don't know,
No,
mine doesn't seem obvious at all. I went with their rookie
Mekhi Becton.
receiver. I went
Oh,
with
Trey
rookie
Harris.
receiver Trey Harris. Yeah.
No, I was deciding between Trey Harris and Mekhi Becton.
Oh,
when I said
good.
that. Yeah,
Good. Okay, good.
I think it's obvious, right? It's got to be.
Okay.
Worked. I mean, we think about this offense and the ways they failed last year and what they need. They addressed it, but did they address it correctly? I think is like the big glaring question that will determine whether this offense improves.
Right. There's no guarantee that a late second round pick who comes from a notoriously difficult to evaluate and translate offense in college at Mississippi like comes in and it's just a because it's Harbaugh and these Chargers. And because they hit on McConkey, I just put like a sheen of competence over everything and kind of think it's going to work because he is what they need. He's a flanker. He's a vertical threat. Like it's exactly what you would have wanted on paper. He's explosive. Like the couple of snaps that he had versus press, because that was a weird offense. Not couple, but when he did play press, he looked pretty good. Like he looks like a great compliment. So it all makes sense. Like he will threaten you vertically, even if he doesn't get a ton of targets. But he's the same age, by the way, as Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnson. They're all 23 years old. So I thought that was interesting. I don't know what it means, but he's not necessarily like some raw, like young kid. He's 23 already.
I think the thing about Harris is they don't need him to be dominant because if there's one conclusion I've come to after revisiting Chargers tape, Ladd McConkey is him. Like, oh my God, dude. I feel like all year I was like, oh, he's amazing, he's great, but he's not, is he really number one? How we talk about him? Yeah, he's finishes near the top in just about every metric when you really isolate it. The one that I think I posted about this, but like his numbers against man coverage are crazy last year. Like better than some of the dudes we think of as being the best receivers in the NFL. But then just like, and I thought, well, maybe he got easy matchups or maybe Roman. No, he was absolutely cooking dudes at the line of scrimmage. He was also winning at all three levels. They didn't use him at all three levels for some of the season. And I think that's something you can even see them expanding upon. There's, to me, like, yes, his size will always be somewhat limiting in terms of like how are we thinking about him and where he fits in the broader, like, is he one of the best dudes in the NFL? But if I'm a defensive coordinator playing the Chargers, that is the first player I am worried about. I mean, it's obviously like, yeah, it's the Chargers, of course he is, but I think defensive coordinators who didn't worry about him paid the price dearly last season.
He wasn't that far off from being a top 10 to 15 wide receiver as a rookie, which you just like in the entire league. So I'm absolutely with you, and I regretted mentioning Jack Besh in his name in the same sentence.
They're really
right away.
So
I wasn't saying they were similar. I mean, I was saying if they could get like a rookie season where like you're feeding a rookie second round pick out of nowhere a ton of targets, but I immediately was like, I stepped into one here and it was bad.
I'll push back though. I do think Becton is really like pivotal for this Chargers season as the signing goes, because ultimately they didn't implode because, I mean, the lack of weapons hurt them, and Herbert really was obviously bad in the playoff game, but the interior offensive line was like the quiet, like what do you call it when there's like a virus in a computer that nobody sees, and all of a sudden it like completely destroyed. Like, they was so bad, and Zion Johnson has not been great for them. Bozeman, I mean, the interior of this offensive line remains a question mark for me. Becton, if he's anything like he was in Philadelphia, certainly helps, but that was the best offensive line ecosystem in the NFL. So I think it's reasonable to ask whether or not you're going to get that dude. They want to run the football better again. Like, he was incredible. Becton was particularly great at run blocking in Philadelphia. Is that something he's going to bring to LA? I just feel like if he plays like he did in Philadelphia, I think I'm going to feel pretty good about this Chargers offense. But if not, I think you could run into a lot of the same issues that they've run into in terms of interior pass pressure.
Yes, and they signed Andre James, a former Raider. They're going to try Zion Johnson at center, which just feels like they didn't pick up his fifth-year option. We're not going to keep this guy, and we're just seeing. You're right. Harbaugh talked about that too in the aftermath of that game, and I thought they would address interior offensive line more than they did. I mean, they signed Becton, but there's not a lot of hope that he's going to be like some great pass protector, and that's what our guy Herbert needs. The Eagles were not, on their list of guys to re-sign. They were not going to re-sign Becton just because they knew it would cost a lot and maybe not the best pass protector.
All right, we're going to wrap with the AFC South. I will go first. I will do the Jacksonville Jaguars. I am not going to give you some hipster pick for this one. It's Travis Hunter. It's box office. Come on. But also, yeah, right? Like, for a number of reasons, but focusing on what is going to be his focus, which is the Jags offense. If Travis Hunter is as advertised at receiver for this team, if he is the best receiver in the class and makes, honestly, the sort of impact BTJ made last year, 17 yards per route run, by the way. I'm just pulling that crazy. Okay. But if Hunter is that, there's no world in which this isn't one of the best passing attacks of football. If those two receivers, right?
Yeah. I mean,
one of. I'm not saying it's going to be.
Yeah.
Obviously, you need Trevor Lawrence to play better, but
you need Trav. You need some help. But you're right.
Like, if he's as good as we think he could be, this is a big if. I also put Travis Hunter because I think they need him to play corner because, oh my God, this corner group, woof woof.
Yeah, it's really weird because we're taping this at a point where we don't know. No one knows. I don't know if the Jaguars really know how they're going to use him. For now, they're having him focus on offense. But yeah, that number 2 cornerback spot right now, it's like it's either Jordan Lewis on the outside when it's 2 cornerbacks, and then you move him inside, or Jerry Jones, who they had a year ago and did some okay things.
In the slot.
Yeah, but he could maybe play like he plays in the slot, and then Jordan Lewis is on the outside. Buster Brown played a lot for them. But yeah, it's if you put Travis Hunter in that group with Tyson Campbell, who is a really good player, then you're feeling pretty good.
Yeah, it's like so much. We're like, hey, just go ahead and be one of the best, be the best rookie receiver, similar to your teammate, and by the way, help your team out at corner because they struggled. That's so much to ask of a rookie, but it is commensurate with the draft capital gave to pick him. And I have enough love for the prospect that I don't think it's insane to say any of this. I really don't. The thing that I'm more skeptical of is the impact at corner, frankly, than just because of the difficulty of it. But I think he can absolutely couple it with BTJ. I mean, you were the original Brian Thomas Jr. guy,
Yes.
and totally vindicated by that pick. How do you see those two fitting together? And like
amazingly,
yeah,
I think Brian Thomas Jr. showed last year he can do more than people expected coming into the league, but I still think Travis Hunter is like a more versatile wide receiver, and the way the two of those can set each other up for a play caller like Liam Cohen, like it's insane. Like you said, you love the prospect enough that you don't think it's insane to ask all that, and I'm with you. Like I'm I'm just confident he can do it. Now how much that is as a rookie, I'm thinking about this, and I'm sure the Jaguars are too on some level, as he should be like a Jaguar, like in the Ring of Honor someday. That's how much I believe in Travis Hunter. Like, and so this is like a long-term relationship. So I'm not sure how the two positions thing works out exactly as a rookie. Like that could be more of a long-term thing, but I think he could be that good of a wide receiver right away. Like if Ladd McConkey can be a top 20 receiver in the league as a rookie, I don't think it's crazy to think Travis Hunter can too.
who gets to play with a guy who was also, by the way,
Right.
a top 20 receiver already in the league. Like it's yeah, with a top play caller as well. I think it's going to be interesting for Liam Cohen if the defense is really struggling to make some of those. It's going to be like a challenging thing for me because it felt like he approached this offseason with more concern for his side of the ball.
Yes.
Which I get. I respect to some degree. Not respect. It's what I would do if I was a.
I respect it because for offense travels, and also just like if they have an awesome offense, like we'll all be happy with Liam Cohen no matter what.
Also,
happens.
like you gotta fix Trev, right? That's and when we talk about what is success, I would argue that's more important in some ways than like winning a playoff game, especially because they're locked in with him. They already signed him to the deal. All right, sticking in the AFC South, give me the Colts.
Okay, I am as excited to talk Laiatu Latu as anyone on this show. I think he makes a lot of sense for this because he was like a solid player as a rookie, Mina. But I don't know. I think you were a fan of his coming out of the draft,
yeah.
right? Like I saw enough, especially again this exercise. I love it. Like I saw enough as a rookie, the flashes, like the quickness, the strength. Like he gave Fashanu all sorts of problems in that Jets game specifically. There was a rep he had too against Penei Sewell where he beats him so bad to the inside where he kind of like fakes one side and then goes around the other with Sewell, and he can play on the inside and did quite a bit. That like he just dusted Sewell, and Sewell like dives at him almost in an embarrassing way, in a way that you never see with Sewell. But that play was very typical of Latu's season, which it was a lot of pressure without a lot of finishing and just like trying to like get your body under control. But the fact that it was a lot of pressure to start with makes me think another year in the system that he can be like a difference-making top 10 type of pass rusher.
So I was a very big fan of Laiatu Latu, and it felt there were a lot of problems with that defense, and I also feel like, you know, there were just moments where he didn't quite finish, and I think he is more of a finesse pass rusher, and I think it's also reasonable to think, okay, like if you can't win right away or you're dealing with superior athletes, there could be a little bit of an adjustment period. I mean, a player who he reminds me of a little bit and was coached by his new defensive coordinator, Lou Anarumo, is Trey Hendrickson, who, by the way, I was also a very big fan of very early. And it's like the one plant my flag. You find my Saints preseason 2020 whatever tweets where I'm like, yo, that guy Trey Hendrickson is destroying dudes. But I do think there is potential here still for a breakout. So I do, and I think it's important because you know, some of the depth has gone. They did draft Ohio State, not Sawyer, the other Tuamalu, and Kwity Paye's still there. Odeyingbo,
he's in Chicago.
Gone. Yeah, but they need him now to be a first round draft pick. You know, and I think you got better players in the secondary. You bring in Cam Bynum and Travarius Ward. That was, I feel like, kind of not discussed enough, is how aggressive the Colts were about giving Lou Anarumo more veterans to work with on the back end, which I thought was very smart based on the Cincinnati experience that we alluded to earlier. But to me, the difference between this Colts defense, which is just during the Gus Bradley regime, was always just kind of like below average-ish, right? It was always like in that like 15 to 25 range.
Mm-hmm.
The difference for them to become, with Anarumo and with these veterans in the secondary, to make that leap to becoming an above average unit or better, definitely hinges on one of these young pass rushers really breaking out, and Latu is a great candidate.
And they still have, Buckner and Grover Stewart inside DeForest Buckner, and so that really should be a strength of the team. And watching him, I think he actually maybe was realizing during the year that he has more strength than he realized, because he does have reps where the bull rush absolutely works. He had some against like Taylor Decker. He had but then he had a lot of other reps where he reminds me, if you'll forgive me for making a tennis analogy, sometimes like tennis prodigies, when they become pros that can do absolutely everything, take a longer time to figure out how to know when to use what, like on the court. They're their own coach. And Latu had so many moves and stuff. There were some times where he'd be like lined up against a tight end, and he like freeze, and like Laporta would get him and then be like, oh man. And it was kind of like that. He didn't know what to do and when to do it, but I feel like experience will help that.
The Lions game is a great shout out, by the way, because there's some real highs and real lows there. So that's a good reference. I would say linebacker too for the Colts, was a real problem tackling last year. And I believe EJ Speed's out. So their rookie last year, Jalen Carlisle, I think I'm saying his name right, is likely to start opposite Zaire Franklin. I'm not going to choose anyone on offense for them because it's so obviously quarterback. It's like,
right.
Just, I can't say like, well, if, Tyler Boyd catches everything, it's like, nah, you just need one of your quarterbacks.
I guess if they're like, I'm a little worried because they lost their offensive interior line to the Vikings, that duo, and see how that goes. But they've got some belief in Tanner Bortolini, who played a lot for them last year. Yeah,
Tanner Bortolini. Awesome. Okay, let's go. I will finish with the Texans. Cam Robinson is the player I mean, you could choose so many players on this offensive line. Have you ever seen that meme where it's the guy and who's saying he upgraded, but it's just him taking a step back, or explaining this wrong.
Yes.
You know the one I'm talking about. It's like a picture of a guy, and it's like the same guy, but he's just like in a different position, and he's saying like it's a whole new me, or so. I don't know. I'm misrepresenting this.
There's like an Alex Jones one that is also similar, where he says he lost 25 pounds and looks the same.
That's how I feel about the Texans offensive line, because I was on NFL Live with Barnwell, and he's like, they knew that it wasn't working and that they got rid of the coaches, that I'm proud of them for that. And I was like, yeah, but you both have to recognize that you have a problem and you have to improve. And I'm not sure that they improved. It's a rejiggering. Poor Titus Howard. I don't even know what he's played, like every position for them. He actually was like decent for them. But tackle is just, if Cam Robinson can't go back to being average the way he was in Jacksonville, you're looking at Ursery, who they drafted this year out of Minnesota, Blake Fisher's on the right side, Trent Brown. It's really, really a so anyways, if Robinson can be average, and we have seen him be average not that long ago, I feel a whole lot better about this setup.
Yeah, I think the view on his time with the Vikings was maybe what the Jaguars felt too, which is like his decline from getting those franchise tags just to be average was, is he still average or not? You're right. That would change everything. I do think that changing the coaching staff and just that coaching can matter more on the offensive line than anything else. Doesn't mean they're going to get it right, but they added all these guys. Yeah, Lincoln Tomlinson and Trent Brown and Ed Ingram, guys that didn't necessarily like work in other places. And then they have the guys that were actually there Do they still have one of the Kenyon Greens? No, both the Greens are gone, but they still have Juice Scruggs like
Juice
there.
Scruggs,
Blake Fisher, who was a second round pick. Man, they've put a lot of resources
Garrett
to it.
Patterson.
Seth Payne, who covers them, and I'm a huge fan of. He did think that blowing the whole thing up and the vibes and everything, and even though that meant losing Tunsil, was like the right move. And I have seen really untalented offensive lines be like the 20th best line in the league because of just like a scheme change. So we'll see. That's what they're hoping for. It's a good pick though.
First time offensive coordinator. Yeah, we'll see. Okay, Tennessee Titans.
Okay, we're wrapping up. I hope this one isn't a bummer, but it's L'Jarius Sneed.
It is a bummer.
It's a bummer for a few reasons. Were you aware that he is waiting to hear if a grand jury indicts him on a felony charge of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon connected to a deadly shooting in December, of which he's also facing a civil allegation where he's alleged to be a passenger in a car that was a shooting. I won't go more into it, but that's hanging over him. That wasn't why I chose him. That was, I maybe knew that last December, but if I had, I forgot about it. And that was just me researching him for the show and seeing if he's healthy or not. And he's not. Like, he still has this weird, mysterious thigh problem that kept him out all of last year, and he's been managing this knee issue. And Brian Callahan had some not so encouraging things to be like, yeah, it sounded like they were hoping for training camp and he's working through it, which was not what I wanted to hear out of a guy who has the third highest cap number at cornerback of anyone in the league. So based on the legal stuff and the injury, like, I don't even know if they're getting anything out of L'Jarius Sneed, but you know, they were hoping that he could be one of the best cornerbacks in the league, and he's getting paid like it.
Yeah, I mean, the Colts took a lot of grief from letting him walk, or probably not the Colts took a lot of grief for not signing him, not letting him walk. I missed when the Chiefs let him walk, and that decision looks pretty good now. This defense really fell apart last year for a litany of reasons, though. Injuries. I'm looking at the group, and there's a few players that I could agree on, pick out, but I think I'm just going to go offense because for me, all that matters for the Tennessee Titans is not ruining Cam Ward. You could pick either tackle, I think.
J.C. Latham was my other pick, yes.
Yeah, Latham on the right side, Moore Jr., who was average in Pittsburgh, is now their starting left tackle, getting paid very good money. I think you could also pick, is Tyler Lockett a crazy choice?
Wow. It is interesting to hear the Titans media and I think how the coaching staff views him as like, oh yeah, well, we've got, Calvin Ridley's 1 and Tyler Lockett's our 2, but we're not so sure about 3. And I'm like,
yeah.
Is Tyler Lockett your 2? Like, he was unsigned for a while. He only got $4 million. You tell me what you think about where he's at.
Yeah, definitely a declining player, and there's a reason why he wasn't signed, and Seattle let him walk for sure. I think at this point, though, if you can get like Jacoby Myers style production out of him, then suddenly you feel a lot better about the group that you've surrounded Cam Ward with. I kind of feel like we know who Ridley is too at this point in his career. That sort of he's had highs and lows and kind of settled to being like the 23rd best. Is that too high?
It's funny because when you write down receivers, you realize how many great receivers
there's so many good receivers. Yeah.
But either way, at worst, he's somewhere between a 1 and a 2. Like, if he's a 2, he's one of the better 2s in the leagues. And obviously for the Titans, he's their best wide receiver. Yeah, that would be a good pick. I mean, this is a team where you could have made a lot of picks, but I will defend my L'Jarius Sneed pick. And this was one of the he was an all-pro.
It was
And he wasn't as bad last year as I expected when I went and looked through it. Like, there were a couple big, like, he let Alec Pierce get behind him on plays that Richardson missed a few times, and that really stuck in people's mind. I think Tyreek Hill did the same thing, and he only played 5 games. But overall, he looked close enough to L'Jarius Sneed. He was just mediocre. And actually, they could have a pretty good second, cornerback group. Jarvis Brownlee was a really good rookie for them out of nowhere, and they have a slot in Roger McCreary that's solid. So I liked him or Latham. Latham is literally the first pick Brian Callahan's ever made, and they're moving his position to make room for Dan Moore back to right tackle, like in his second year, which is a little concerning. And they kind of made it sound like maybe he wasn't fully ready for everything, and that now he's more ready, which is one of those comments.
He played right tackle in college some, right?
Yes, that was where he came from, and so I think they feel like that's his more natural position, and maybe the O-line comes together. Like if there's a route to them being a surprisingly good team, like let's say they beat their over/under win total by 3 or something, they win 8 games or like, it's probably because the offensive line is really good.
I don't know about really good, but I think
you got Bill Callahan, you got 2 top 10 picks or 2 high picks in Skoronski and Latham. You got a highly paid center. I mean, you got
Levis made them look worse than they were, and I guess that's kind of why I was seeking receiver a little bit though with Ward, which is. When we think about like what a successful season for Cam Ward, he talked about this a lot with him. When he throws it fast, it looks awesome, right? When he plays in the pocket, it's really good. It's just, there were just moments where he's kind of like, what if I did this instead? And I think if he develops trust with his receivers, Tyler Lockett, a guy who, could be the beneficiary of that in terms of working the short intermediate parts of the field. You think about, they're going to run a lot of RPOs with him. It's almost as important as, the offensive line, although this has the potential to be an okay offensive line.
Brought in Kevin Zeitler. It's a lot of guys, like Lloyd Cushenberry. Yeah, it's mostly the Callahan dust that it didn't fully take hold last year, or didn't really at all. But I'm hoping that it does with guys maybe more in their natural positions.
Totally forgot that the Titans signed Draymond Jones, by the way. A lot of former Seahawks. Titans is like a popular former Seahawk team.
If you look at like the Titans signings over the last 4 years or so, they are so random, and
Cody
they
Barton.
look like a team that's had 3 different GMs in 5 years or 4 years. That's what they look like.
Well said. All right. Well, thus concludes our AFC X-Factors. Thank you so much to Gregg, who you guys, if you don't already subscribe, should check out his excellent podcast, NFL Daily. Are you daily right now?
It's a dirty secret. I think we're closer to like 4 right now. It's the off season. Yeah.
No, I had to call you out immediately for that. We'll be back next week to do NFC X Factors. In the meantime, I think the day after this hits your ears, I am publishing interviews with players on YouTube. You can also watch them on ESPN2, but my first will be with one of my favorite players of this generation, longtime Mina Kimes Show fave, Levante David, who was a total delight, by the way. So fun, so great. So you can check that out at youtube.com/@Mina Kimes. Thank you, as always, also to everyone at Omaha Productions who makes this show: Kirsten Specky, Anthony Jimenez, Owen Saylor, Jack Foster, Tucker Tashton. I will see you guys next week.